Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and the late comers as well. My name is Niels Harrits. I come from Copenhagen, and I welcome you and thank you all for coming out tonight to hear a presentation of mine. One more visitor. To hear a presentation of mine on the events on Manhattan on September 11th, 2001. My presentation will come in two parts. The first part is a little longer than the second one. The first part will last for about a little more than an hour, depending on what happens during that hour. It also depends on you. Then there will be an intermission, and the second part is not as long as the first part, and we all hope that we may finish before 10 o'clock, because this is the limit for renting of this wonderful, beautiful hall. When I say it depends, it's because I urge you to forward questions on the fly during the presentation. You're welcome. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and let us hear the questions on the fly immediately so they don't get cold. And the only stupid question is the one which was never asked. Please remember that. And but whatever questions may come to your mind, they should relate to whatever is happening up here. And what I'll present for you tonight will be, it's not natural science, but it's getting close in the sense that it will be facts, numbers, evidence, observations. So therefore, it is not permitted to forward any political statements tonight. Or at least I will not take part in any discussion in that direction. I'm here as a scientist, and we'll deal with real objects. And here you see two very real objects as they presented themselves to the rest of the world up to September the 11th, 2001. The Twin Towers, ladies and gentlemen. This photograph was taken from New Jersey, meaning that the photographer had his back to the west. He is looking towards the east, so we have north to the left and we have south to the right. So this was the North Tower. It was finished in 1970 and stood there at a height of 110 stories, 417 meters, and at that time it was the highest building in the world. Later was added a TV antenna, 100 meters, 17 tons. So this is how you can distinguish the North Tower from the South Tower. The North Tower is the one with the antenna. Can you all hear me in the back? Okay, very good. The South Tower was finished in 1973, exactly the same height, 110 stories, 417 meters, and the whole thing was, initiated, was started in April of 1973. It means that about 2 months ago, they would have had their 41 years anniversary if it wasn't for 9/11. You may wonder how much what would be the weight of such a twin tower? Well, a fair conservative estimate would be 312,000 metric tons. 320,000 metric tons would be the weight of such a twin tower. It is not important to us. What counts to us is that 90,000 of all these thousands of tons of the Twin Towers were steel. Because the Twin Towers, as the most American high-rises, were built around a steel skeleton. The Americans call it a steel frame high-rise. Just shortly to give you an impression about the enormity of these buildings, inform you, this is a picture of the North Tower taken during construction, and it had in the center 47 core columns of steel and 236 perimeter columns all the way around. You'll see these pictures later on again. this also taken during construction. The core columns were all different. Some were solid, some were hollow. This is one so-called box column, and this is construction worker. The perimeter columns, you see them here, just to give you an impression of the dimension of these buildings. Now, in the morning of 9/11, there was a French TV crew following a young man who wanted to be a firefighter. The Americans call it a rooker. And at the station, fire station where this young man was working, there came an alarm, the smell of gas, in one of the tiny streets of downtown Manhattan. So what you're going to see now is actually the fire chief himself. His name is Joe Pfeiffer. It is unrelated to the rest of the story, but this is the firefighter himself going out checking for gas. This has nothing to do with the rest of the story, but what counts is that it meant that there was a TV crew on the right spot, on the right time, and the time was 14 minutes to 9.
It was 8:46 in the morning.
And then we heard a plane come over, and in Manhattan, you don't hear planes too often. I like the especially loud ones.
That was the North Tower, which was hit by an airliner, 14 minutes to 9. Then 17 minutes went by, and this thing happened.
Can you have it a little higher? So
The microphone?
Yeah, the top.
Okay.
We've seen it from the front angle before, but not from this angle.
The South Tower was hit 3 minutes past 9. Then 56 minutes went by, and this thing happened. No.
This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents, and you can see the two towers. A huge explosion now raining debris on all of us.
This was the South Tower. After 56 minutes it went down. I had the same event in another recording where you can see how the top of the South Tower actually starts tilting before the whole thing comes down.
Appearing to fall away from the rest of the building. Can we go to the tape now? Here we go, right here. This is, I mean, when you look at it, the building has collapsed. That tower just came down.
Let's go to Bob Bazell, who was at St. Vincent's Hospital. Bob.
Then, roughly half an hour went by, 29 minutes. You all know what is going to coming up now. This is the North Tower. Again, I have the event in another recording, this time taken from New Jersey on long distance, so we can see how enormous these buildings were. not what we are going to talk about today. Not for the first part of my presentation at least. Until 8 years ago, I thought the World Trade Center were the Twin Towers. The World Trade Center was a center and was composed of 7 buildings. The North Tower, which was hit first by an airliner, was called World Trade Center 1. World Trade Center 2, the South Tower. World Trade Center 3, the Marriott Hotel, 22 stories. Number 4, number 5, and number 6 were all relatively small buildings. But World Trade Center 7 over here was a huge building, at least after Danish standards. You see, this is a picture of the same area taken from the south. You have the North Tower, the South Tower number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6. And then World Trade Center 7 is here on the other side of a little street which is still called Vesey Street. World Trade Center 7 was younger than the rest of the center. It was from 1987 and still a gigantic building, 160 meters high, 47 stories, and a footprint a little less than a soccer field. Here you see a picture of Building 7. This is the south side and this is the north side. The picture being taken at a time, 5 minutes to 9, when the North Tower had been hit. The South Tower has not been hit yet. And it presents itself as a modern and very robust, actually, office building covered with brown marble. And here you see how big it actually, how deep it was. This is the south. This is the plaza of World Trade Center. And so you may ask the question, who were the tenants? Who worked in World Trade Center 7? Well, there was, of course, a bunch of financial institutions, as there are abundant on the south of Manhattan. We're not really interested in that. It should be mentioned, though, that Salomon Smith and Barney, a broker company, had rented the upper 20 floors of the building. So in some connections, it is simply called the Salomon Building, or in the BBC cover of this, it is the Salomon Brothers Building. More interesting, I think, to us is what you have of government offices in the building. Maybe not the Equal Opportunity Commission, but the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, they had offices in the building. So had the Tax Service. The CIA had their New York undercover headquarters in the building. It was revealed a couple of days later in the New York Times. Secret Service had the biggest office outside of Washington, D.C. And Secret Service is a very important body in the American power structure. They're actually number 3 after the president and the vice president. So if for some reason the president and the vice president are not available, if they had an accident or whatever, the command goes to Secret Service. The button, the nuclear war button, goes to Secret Service automatically. So they are very important. They also determines where the president and the vice president should be. If they tell him or her to leave, they actually are committed to leave. Somebody thinks that Securities and Exchange Commission is very interesting in this context. I don't know exactly what we should call it in English or Icelandic, but it is a body which deals with corruption and fraud within the American society.
We call it fjármálaeftirlitið.
Okay, can you all hear that? Yeah. It deals with everything regarding fraud and criminal acts within American corporations. And some people think that they are doing too much and others that they are doing too little. But what is a fact is that at the time of 9/11, there were the acts of between 3,000 and 4,000 unsolved cases lying in their offices on the 12th and the 13th floor. Furthermore, on the 23rd floor, there was an Office of Emergency Management, which is, we can also make a little story out of that. We do not have time to tell that. Instead, we should see what happens to building 7, 20 minutes past 5 in the afternoon. Now, if you may excuse me, I'm a little curious. Who of you has never seen this before? Okay, thank you for coming. I have the event. I have a few. There are between 5 and 10 recordings of this event. I'll show 3 here for a start. The next one is taken down the street called West Broadway Street. And it is, so we can see how gigantic this building was. It's not a chicken shack.
Excuse me for a second.
Please.
Am I seeing the reality, the 3 buildings, they all fall down like this?
What you're seeing is real life, yes.
I'm not listening, okay?
And the next one is taking long distance Manhattan. We have a lot. I think let's turn it down. It's taking long distance, so it's a little unfocused. But if you, I'll crank up the volume because the sound side is very interesting. And at least you can see how the building is going down completely symmetrically.
Yeah.
Again, what you're seeing are high shots. Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself. Now we're going to videotape the collapse of this building. It's an amazing, incredible pick you were. For the 3rd time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before. A building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down. And
Building 7 fell down into a little tidy pile. You see it here. 20 meters, 2 stories high. And it did so very remarkably without actually hurting the buildings around it. Maybe a chunk was taken off here, but it falls literally into its own footprint. Here, this is a photograph of the same pile taken from the south. And again, you see the uncorrupted facades of the building around here. It barely gets onto the sidewalks on the other side of the street. And what is left is only the steel frame. Everything else is completely pulverized. So it's falling down into its own footprint. And for illustrating that, I put in this picture in between from the days when everything was still okay. So consider, this is a little less than a soccer field. They're almost 200 meters down to the ground. This is a car. And still this whole construction manages to collapse into a little pile which barely reached the sidewalks on the other side of the street. It's quite remarkable. We call the course of event an implosion, which is the opposite of an explosion. If you have a container and the pressure is too high, it goes and everything explodes around. But if you can imagine, you can suck out all the air of a cola can, it will collapse into itself. It's the opposite. When something is collapsing into itself, you call it an implosion. And this is what happened to this building. The center goes down first, and then the outer panels is kind of folding on top of the rest of the pile. It's very neatly done, actually. So this is our first challenge for tonight. This is what the problem we had, to try to find out or shine light on why did Building 7 collapse. So let us repeat.
It's gone, man.
Now if you are trained, if you're a scientist, one of the questions which comes up immediately is, how fast is this actually happening? And I'll draw on an American high school teacher called David Chandler. And he's a brilliant teacher. He's retired now, as I am. And but he took the effort actually a couple of years ago to measure, to take a closer look. This is high school physics. It's very elementary. It is going on in this time in a software called Tracker. And what we're following here is the northwest corner of the building going down in time. In an American video, you have 30 frames a second, so we have an internal clock. We know exactly the time, and you can calibrate the width of the building. And it resulted in this plot, which is about the most physics you'll be exposed to tonight. So if you have problems with that, just hold your breath. It won't hurt, and it will soon be over. But what we're having here, you'll see here the velocity. And we measure that in meters per second as a function of time. These are seconds. And all the points here are going downwards because the building is going downwards. And so after 2 seconds, we can see the speed downwards is 14 meters per second. After 3 seconds, you see the speed downwards is 24 meters per second. The speed is increasing. And when the speed is increasing, we call it acceleration. Because at all these points from here to here is lying on a straight line over 2.3 seconds. It means that the speed is increasing constantly, and we have constant acceleration for this amount of time. Another thing you should also notice is that the curve there's a, what did you say? I forgot. Well, you see, you have a clean break here at this point. It is a discontinuity. That's it. So and this is exactly the same thing. I'm just showing it. It's from another video, because here you can see that the top 47th floor has been lying still since 1987, and then it suddenly goes into this downward motion with constant acceleration for 2.3 seconds. I should mention that you can easily anticipate or understand that the steeper this one is, the higher is the acceleration, because the faster the velocity increases. So when this is very steep, the acceleration is high. So you can measure the acceleration from the size of this angle down here, and we reach a value, this is the slope, this acceleration, of 9.88 meters per second squared. This is the only number. You don't have to remember it, I will. Because this is a very important number. In order to shine further light on this, I turn to a person who really knows this shit. He knows about gravity, he knows about how bodies move in time and space. So Isaac Newton wrote a very famous book in 1687 called Principia. It's the basis of science. It's the most important book in science. So he knew stuff. So I asked Isaac Newton, what does it mean that the speed is constant? He said, that is constant acceleration. Maybe we could have figured that out ourselves. And I said, we found an acceleration of 9.88 meters per second squared. And he said, this is free fall. Now what does this mean by that? It should be taken literally. It means free fall. He had also written a book on gravity. And it means that the 47th floor is falling freely when it starts falling. It means that if somebody would have been standing on the 47th floor, holding a ball, an apple, or a stone, and releasing it at the same time that he or she started moving, the ball would fall at the same speed at the 47th floor. We have a little video illustrating that. This is free fall.
The ball has started to drop, yet 7 World Trade is still above the starting line. At the 1 second mark, 7 World Trade and the ball are still even. 7 World Trade indeed falls 100 meters in 4.5 seconds.
Going back to Sir Isaac Newton, he came up with a formula actually for free fall. This goes back to Galileo Galilei actually. This is Galilei's formula from 1593. But it was Sir Isaac who came up with a proportionality constant here. You don't have to bother about that. But it says that the height of fall is proportional to the time squared. And then it's fairly easy for any school student to calculate. You take a pocket calculator. So 2 meters of free fall takes 1.66 seconds. And now I'll do a little physics demonstration, ladies and gentlemen, which involves my hairbrush.
What does it mean, constant acceleration?
Yeah, the constant is half of the, it's called the gravitational constant. But this is my hairbrush, okay? What I do now, I put it down on the floor. It's lying on the floor and it will stay there. We all know that because the floor actually pushes the hairbrush when the hairbrush pushes down, so it doesn't move. Now I work on the hairbrush. I lift my hairbrush up here. Now I have worked on the hairbrush and the hairbrush has potential energy. By working, I have added energy to the hairbrush. You can get that energy back. You can get some of your work back. If you put a little string on the hairbrush around a wheel, it can work and it can lift something, or it can carry a generator. You can get currency out of that. That is how you get electricity in Iceland. You have waterfalls, basically. You're taking advantage of the potential energy of the water up in the mountains, and it can work. But if you do not let it work, as I saw the other day actually in the waterfall, it will fall quite freely. And it will fall at an acceleration of 9.88 meters per second squared. Because all the potential energy which I have put into the hairbrush will be released for accelerating the hairbrush. It should take 0.66 seconds. I count to 4, I release it on 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it hit the carpet until I had said 4. And if you had a smartphone or whatever you carry around, and the measurement had been done accurately, it would have taken exactly 0.66 seconds. So all the energy in the hairbrush was going into the acceleration. And you cannot use energy twice. So it means that when the 47th floor of building 7 starts to moving, there is no other energy for breaking the thousands of steel beams and steel columns in the building. At that moment, all the supporting structure of the building is gone. And it must have been taken out in a symmetrical way, because you see the building coming down completely symmetrical. This is a conclusion and an observation around which there is no way around it. There is no way to discuss this further. So what we are doing here, in all modesty, of course, is science. We are making observations. And we have observed the building 7 came down in free fall for the first 2.3 seconds. We have seen the sudden onset, what the Americans called it. It's lying still, and then it goes, the whole building goes directly into free fall of the entire upper front. We see the building coming down symmetrically, and we see building 7 fell all the way down. There is nothing left. It's complete. It's a nice pile. There's nothing sticking out. Now, some of you may have had a strained relationship with your physics teacher, and I understand that very much. But we can all count to 3, okay? So this may be the proper time to remind ourselves that there were 2 airliners, but there were 3 skyscrapers. Building 7 was not hit by an airliner. This is our challenge, And if we want to go further into that, we should take a look at the steel frame structure of Building 7. Like most American high-rises since the 50s, they had the following design. In Building 7, there was 24 sturdy core columns, and in the perimeter you had 57 columns all the way around. Of course, they're both connected horizontally with steel beams and steel girders, and then the floors are lined like bookshelves between the horizontal steel girders in here and the horizontal steel beams out here, and they carry nothing. The whole, except for people working in the offices, the weight of the building is carried by the columns. Between 60 and 70% is carried by the core columns, and the rest is carried by the perimeter columns. In the core, there is all kind of technical installations, elevators, water supply, air conditions, electricity, stuff like that. Emergency stairs. And we do not have a picture of Building 7 during construction. So in order to give you a real photograph of this design, which is, as I told you, is used in all American high-rises since the 1950s. And actually, the World Trade Center was innovative in this respect. I show you the same pictures as you saw in the start. So let me repeat, the Twin Towers were roughly twice as tall as Building 7, and maybe that's why there were roughly twice the number of core columns, 47 in the center here, and 236 perimeter columns. The length here is 60.5 meters. You have seen this picture as well. The core columns were different. They were not exactly the same. Some of them were solid. This is one core column. Some of them was hollow. This is a so-called box column. And the thickness of such a side of the column down at the base was 20 centimeters, and it narrowed up until in the top it was 10 centimeters. This is a construction work, and this is huge. This is the perimeter columns. They were collected 3 by 3 and welded together down here, actually very strong welding. This is a floor structure, and we'll take a closer look at that. It will have some importance later on. There was a very light steel skeleton. Everything had to be very light, because if you move something half a kilometer up in the air, you better not weigh too much. So it was very light. What you cannot see here is that there is a very thin steel plate going across, and on top of that you have concrete in a thickness between 10 and 18 centimeters, depending on what kind of floor this was. And this is the concrete in the building. That's all concrete there is, amounting to, I think, around 40,000 metric tons. There was a lot of wallboard and gypsum, but it's not relevant here. And then they were lying on what the Americans call seats and bolts into them out here, and they carried whoever was working in the offices. The view is spectacular, and that is what we can say about this. Going back to Building 7, to show you what a facade would look like, all the vertical lines here are the perimeter columns, and they are connected horizontally by steel beams and girders to a kind of mosquito net structure. Now, Building 7 was not hit by an airliner, but still we may philosophize on what happens if you punch a hole in a mosquito net with a pencil. Nothing happens. There you have a hole, the mosquitoes flies in and out, but the net is still there. And this is exactly also what happened to the World Trade Center. The airliner punched a hole in it, and it shouldn't go any further from there. This is the bottom of the core. This building, this is World Trade Center 7. This is the south side you see here. On this drawing, the artist has removed all floors, all windows, and all walls. And what remains is, what is the proper English word for this? When you go to the playground in the park, and the kids are crowding up something, what do you call that? Multi-bush?
Monkey bars.
Clear again.
Multi-bar, yeah, I'm not
Monkey bars.
Monkey bars? Okay. This is gigantic monkey bars, 186 meters. And this is what it is. This is what the story is about. This is the steel frame. This is what you see collecting at free fall, collapsing at free fall. This, you'll see, I'll show this later on again. So, when we ask the question, how come we have all these observations to account for, where should we go to look for an explanation? Well, the first publication where you should expect that we get a hint of what was going on was the 9/11 Commission report. This was a parliamentary report which came out on the 22nd July 2004, 738 pages, which according to these 9 gentlemen and this woman at the presentation would cover everything that happened on that fatal day. They do not mention Building 7 at all. It is not the parliamentary report at all. It is a non-happening event. So we put our face to an institution called the National Institute of Standards and Technology. This, I don't know what you should call this in Icelandic actually, but it's an institution which within the technical branches and all the scientific branches, takes care of regulatives, standardization, all kind of measurements. But it NIST, as we abbreviated it, N-I-S-T, NIST is what it's called among professionals. NIST takes care of much more than that. There are between 5,000 and 6,000 academics actually employed in this institution. It's huge. But it's important for the rest of this story that it is not an independent academic institution. It is under the Secretary of Commerce, and the director of NIST is being exchanged each time you get a new administration in the United States. You know that when they have a new president, they clear the whole thing, and then all people coming in are new. And the same goes for the director of NIST. It's he or she is politically appointed, and they have complete control of what's coming out. In particular, this control was tightened dramatically when George W. Bush came into office. Now, NIST got an appointment in 2002. They got $16 million, and later they got $4 million further. These are peanuts. And was assigned to come up with a technical explanation for the collapse of the 3 high-rises of World Trade Center. The first thing they did was to separate Building 7 from the investigation. So they split the investigation in 2. We take the Twin Towers first, and we take Building 7 on the side. We keep them for a while. They didn't. We know that they started on 7 right away, but they didn't tell us first. So the final report on the Twin Towers came in September 2005, 14,000 pages. I can say a lot of bad things about that. I will not. I will return to this report at the end of the second part of tonight's presentation. For the moment, we concentrate on Building 7. And the report on Building 7 was postponed repeatedly. Every half year they said, oh, it will come in half a year, it will come in half a year. But at the end of 2008, they couldn't hold it back any further. So we had a preliminary report in August, and the final report came in October, a couple of days after the presidential election by accident. And this is the front page of the NIST report on Building 7. And this is the official account of why Building 7 collapsed. And I'll spend actually the rest of this first part of my presentation trying to give NIST a chance. The NIST have 2 conclusions in their report. And the one is that the structural damage of Building 7 was minor and was not important. Why do they write this? You may imagine that at that time, 7 years has gone by since the event and since the report came out. And in the meantime, many people have speculated why Building 7 came down, and there have been many hypotheses in circulations. Some of them were probably aired by NIST themselves to check out how much they could get along with. And maybe some of you have been thinking that if you have 320,000 tons twin tower collapsing 100 meters away, you may expect the ground to shake a little. So maybe the foundations of Building 7 had been damaged, and maybe all the debris which was being thrown out from the twin towers would damage Building 7, so it just collapsed due to mechanical damage. No. You would not expect such that there would be a 10 hours lapse between cause and action. It does not take 7 hours if you kick down something under something. It will not take 7 hours for it to fall. But we don't have to bother about that because NIST say it doesn't matter, which is quite correct. NIST said, pardon?
It was minor.
Okay. NIST says that Building 7 collapsed primarily due to conventional office fires. This is their key claim. And it was me who put down this question mark, this mark of expression, and because NIST knows very well that this is a daring proposition. You should, for that simple reason that it has never happened before or after 9/11, that a steel frame high-riser should collapse due to fires. And it is not because there haven't been fires like that. Actually, whenever you have people who make high-rise constructions, they count on that during the lifetime of a high-riser, you will always have a fire. You will have at least one major fire. So of course they build according to that. Please.
If World Trade Center 7 had collapsed due to this fire, then why would it have collapsed from underneath? Why didn't the floors on each side of the fire just simply crash against each other like this?
Yeah, that's a very good question. That's good thinking. But here we are drawing from experience, and all science is based on experience. So we're looking in what is experience with high-rise fires. And the fact is that they do not collapse due to fire. There's been hundreds of fires in steel frame high-rises, and I'll show you just a few. Now this is from 1991, Philadelphia. It raged for 18 hours and cleared 8 floors. The building remained standing. 1988, another famous fire in Los Angeles Interstate Banks was out of control for 3.5 hours. And I have read a summary of the fire report myself, and there were no damage to the main structural members in the building. The building remained standing. More recent here, we are in the capital of Qatar in the Persian Gulf. It's called Doha. You see a high-riser here. It's raging fire. The building remains standing. Caracas, Venezuela, it raged for 17 hours, over 26 stories. The building remains standing, etc., etc. Have there ever been major fires in the Twin Towers? Yes, actually, there were fires quite frequently. There were 12 firemen on the guard 24 hours, 7 days a week, because at that time they were permitted to smoke. So it happened occasionally that they put the cigarettes into the waste bin and the whole thing caught fire, and then the firemen came out and put out the fires. It happened quite frequently, actually. But there has also been major fires. Is this a question, please? Yes?
Has there ever been one high-rise that actually fell down?
No.
No.
It has never happened.
Never before?
No. Or after.
Okay.
And it happened 3 times on that day. Yes, please.
Plus the possibility of a whole floor system falling down at the same time is almost not available in this scenario, because when you're melting steel bars, you'll get a state which is between liquid and hardened state, which means that one corner should always give before another.
Yeah, that's good thinking. It's not a question, it was just a comment. Right. So, but have there been big fires in the Twin Towers? Yes, there was a major fire. The biggest one was in 1975, actually. And there are no pictures from this event. They have disappeared from the big newspapers. What do you say? Yeah, archives. But so this is a copy from the report in the New York Times. I know that it's 6 floors here, but it was actually over 10 floors, and it lasted more than 3 hours in the North Tower. And when you had a fire in the high-rise, and when it's finished, you call the engineers and you say, please come and look at this. And if some of the steel beams have fallen down, or broken, or bent, they exchange them. But the report here from the engineers said that the fire did not cause structural damage to World Trade Center 1. So the building remained standing for at least 26 years. Now you may ask, has it ever happened that an airliner has crashed into a high-riser? Yes, it has also happened. And now we are dealing with another characteristic profile of the New York skyline, namely the Empire State Building. It happened during the last days of the Second World War, when there was a B-25 bomber. There were no bombs in the machine, but there was a lot of jet fuel. Not jet fuel, ordinary fuel. He was on his way from Connecticut. His name was William Smith. And there was severe, complete pea soup fog on Lower Manhattan, so he couldn't see a thing. He was supposed to land on Newark Airport on the other side, and he simply slammed into the Empire State Building somewhere up here, I don't know where, maybe it was on the other side. But this is a picture of the impact hole, and the fire was extinguished, actually, and if you have been to New York or you intend to go there, you'll recognize that the Empire State Building is still there. And so they just repaired the damage. After a week, people were still on work on the floors, which was not affected by the impact. So this is what happened when an airliner hits a steel frame. You repair the damage, and life goes on. So this is actually our situation, and we can stop here and you could go home. Because science is based on experience, and experience tells us that a steel frame high-rise does not collapse due to fire. But we are decent people, so let's give NIST a chance, and over the next 10-15 minutes, we'll go through the line of reasoning in the NIST report. It'll be a little technical, but we have to do this. I'm quoting now from the NIST report. The collapse of the North Tower, this is what they claim, that the collapse of the North Tower ignited fires on at least 10 floors in Building 7, which burned out of control, I put this question mark, on floors 7, 8, 9, and 11, 12, 13. I should mention here, it's not in the slide, but the North Tower collapsed on 10/29. But the first visual documentation we have on fires in Building 7 is from 10 minutes past 12. It's just a footnote. But they claim that the collapse of the North Tower ignited these fires on 10 floors. By 1 p.m., there were no visual evidence that the small early fires on floors 19, 22, 29, 20, 30 were still burning, which means that out of these 10 floors, the upper 4 floors was gone out at 1 o'clock, and there are still 4.5 hours to the building collapsing. So we are left with 6 floors, only 7, 8, 9, and 11, 12, 13. So you go into the NIST report. The chapter where they're telling us about the fire is very good work, actually. You don't have to remember this, but I want you to know that this is very accurate accounted for. On the 7th floor from the news report, you observed fires from 2 o'clock to 15 minutes past 3, from 15 minutes past 4 until 25 minutes later, etc. These are observations. You don't have to remember that. The only thing which we are a little interested in is the 12th floor, where fires was observed from 2 minutes past 2 to 2:30, and burst on and off until the building collapsed on 20 minutes past 5. Please notice that none of these times are before 2 o'clock. And we have just been told that the upper 4 floors were gone out at 1 o'clock, meaning that according to NIST, there were no fires in the building between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock. So you may ask, why does it start to burn again at 2 o'clock? And I don't know. But they did. The fires came up at 2 o'clock. For one reason or another. Let's take a look, just a short look through the fires of Building 7. The first picture I'm showing you is one of the early fires which had gone on, or had gone out at 1 o'clock. But this is because it's the only documentation of that there was any fires at all on the south side. This is the southwest corner. And these numbers are referring to the numbering of the floors. So this is the 29th floor, where you can see that there has been fires in these offices, still burning in here. On the 30th floor, there have been fires here, they've gone out. It's still burning on the corner, and maybe a few offices down on the south side. But this is the second observation of fires. The first one from 10 minutes past 12. But we're not really interested in this because this has gone out before 1 o'clock. More exciting is what's going on during the afternoon. This is the opposite side of the building. This is the east facade here. We are around the 11th, 12th, 13th floor. This is the same area, and now we have an exact timing of it. It's 2:30. This is the southeast corner here. You have fires on the 11th and the 12th floor and the 13th eventually. And the small numbers here are referring to the numbering of the perimeter columns behind the facade, for your information. Firemen is not really impressed by these fires. These are not raging fires. This is ordinary office fires. A little later, this is the north facade where you see most of it from, and we see fires are emerging here a little in on the 12th floor and on the 7th floor. 15 minutes later, the fire on the 12th floor has moved a little westwards and a little eastwards. It stops actually here now, but it keeps on moving westwards. Down on the 7th floor, we have a little satellite fire again to the west. Fires in these office buildings, they had to move on because typically an office fire lasts for 20 minutes. And then there's nothing left to burn in an ordinary office. So it has to move on if it will not die out. This is what is happening here.
Excuse me, Neil.
Please.
Can I ask you to go back a few slides?
Sure.
One question.
Going back a few slides to this one?
Stop, yes.
Or that one?
No, the next one. This one?
Okay.
Okay. What is it behind there? Is that the fire we're seeing, the yellow thing?
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
This is smoke.
Okay, this is just smoke and sunshine. This is not
some
raging inferno in the background.
Well, if you give me 3 minutes, I'll tell you exactly what's going on.
All right,
behind.
thank
you. So here we saw that one, yeah, and that was 15 minutes later. You see the fires on the 12th floor. It has gone out in the east part of it. It's moving to the west. The same here down the 7th floor. It's also gone out on the east part of it. It's moving to the west. An hour later, we are back in this is the same southeast corner where I left you and where you came out with this question. While we're gone, the fires here on the 12th and 13th floor has gone out. There's been a fire in the meantime also on the 8th floor. It's gone out. It's still smoking out of this. Maybe he forgot his winter tires. in there, so you see a heavy smoke. And then you see the smoke is going around the corner. There was a weak wind that morning. It came in from the north. So you had the oil on the bankside. And the question actually that this gentleman was forwarded just a minute ago was, what's going on here in the back? Where does all this smoke come from? Some of it comes from Building 7, no doubt about it. It was smoldering from the building. There was smoke coming out. The point is, you do not call it a fire unless you see fire. But there was a lot of smoke coming out of it. So some of it came from Building 7. But the rest of it here came from World Trade Center 5, which was behind Building 7. And now I'll show you what World Trade Center 5 looked at this time, and by doing this, also answer your question. Your question. This is Building 5 on the back of Building 7. And the reason for showing it, there's no sound on this clip, so I can talk over it. The reason for me to show it is that this is World Trade Center burning. It is actually burning. There is actually a fire here, and it is smoking. And it is a steel frame, and it did not collapse. But it's only 9 stories, so it doesn't count for a high-riser. But I still think it's World Trade Center is burning, and it's not collapsing. So let's go back to Building 7 now. And these pictures are taken moments before collapse. This one, there is a genuine timestamp on. Please notice that at that time, digital cameras were not so common as they are these days. So this one you do not have a timestamp on, but the timing has been determined by NIST from the slope of this shadow here. And if you're very good at it, you will know the exact time. There's also a little story about the traffic lights. And the point is, there are no fires. You cannot see them. So yes, there were random office fires in the building, but on some websites you can read that they were raging infernos for 7 hours. This is not correct, and it doesn't matter either. So what I'll do now is I'll go through NIST, what you call mechanical collapse scenario. This is the course of events which, according to NIST, should describe the collapse of Building 7. Now they claim that this is a picture taken from the third video I showed in the start. And if you have a memory like a bear trap, you can recall that before the whole building is going down, you see a penthouse up here collapse, which is kinking, and then is sinking into the building, moments before the whole building is coming down. Now, any mechanical collapse scenario should account for that. And now we have a problem with the 4 corners of the world, because this floor plan is upside down. What you just saw before is the north side of the building, where all the videos are from, for a very good reason that the south side was hell on earth. You were not allowed to go there. There are very few pictures from that. So the penthouse going into the building was right over column number 79, here out in the northeast corner. And now NIST claims that there was a fire on the 12th floor, out here in the northeast corner here, which heated the steel beams supporting the 13th floor here. And when steel is being heated up, it expands. According to NIST, but no, not according, this is true, it expands. But according to NIST, this expansion caused the beam connecting column number 79 with column number 49, pushing it so that it falls down. So this beam expands and it pushes this steel beam so it falls down. This is an illustration from the NIST report. And they claim that the floors under the 13th building here is falling down, taking along with it 5, 6, 7 floors, which now means that the column number 79 is devoid of its horizontal support, so it starts bending and then it comes down. This is why the penthouse on the roof comes down. And which means that then column 80 and column 81 is then also devoid of its horizontal support. They come down too. And now this local damage in the northeast corner of the building is spreading horizontally through the inner part of the building. So the whole core is going down. And when this has happened, the perimeter column starts buckling, and then the perimeter column comes down, and this is what we see. This is the NIST collapse model. Okay? And I have this is from the NIST webpage. It's a lousy illustration, and it's very fast. So hold on. What you see here is the 13th floor coming down, taking down a few floors. Now this is column 79 starts bending, and that's all there is. But what does NIST do this time? They do, there'll be more videos later on. They do not do experiments. None. Regarding building 7. They did experiments with the Twin Towers, but they are not doing experiments now. They are completely reliant on what they call computer simulations, which means that they are creating a virtual mathematical model of the building within a computer. And then they ask the computer to make calculations. Now, doing this is okay when you're dealing with huge data sets. I'm using that myself. When you have, or my students, I can't do it. My students are doing this. We're doing this. So when you have huge data sets, it's absolutely scientifically sound to use computer simulations to, if you have a hypothesis, to try to fit the data with the hypothesis using computers. But when you do that in the scientific world, of course, you're committed to publish your software, your whole procedure, and all the parameters you put into the computer as a basis of the calculations. NIST won't do that. They say, we have done the calculations and this is our conclusion. And we ask, may we look into the computer? And they say no. They just point on their computer, say, the answer is in my computer. It's a complete black box. This is height of dishonesty. This is scientific dishonesty on a high scale. So these very demanding calculations are extremely complicated. They have huge Hewlett-Packard computers doing these calculations. One calculation will last between 6 to 8 months. You'll see the result now in 2 minutes, because they came out with a little video as a result of their simulations, their attempt to justify their hypothesis. But before doing that, let us just be very grounded, use a little ordinary sense. This is what you call the monkey something from the playground. This is a skeleton. 186 meters. You have a little soccer field up here. This is the south side. So we have a problem with north and south. The 79th column is up here in the northeast corner, going all the way through the building and actually 20 meters down to bedrock. And so NIST wants us to believe that this whole steel frame should come down in free fall due to a fire on the 12th floor, which is in the opposite corner from the little red dot here, which should take this whole thing down. And now they come up with this video I'll show you now. It is from the north side. What you'll see now is the video animation from I call it an animation. They call it simulation. And I call it an animation because you all know what computers can do nowadays. You can have the computers do exactly what you want. You can barely go to the movies without the pictures have been manipulated. well, it may happen, but usually they manipulate the pictures. They can have Spider-Man flying through the air due to computer graphics. So you can have the computer make whatever you do. So imagine NIST has really done their best to have what you're going to see fit their hypothesis. Well, let's see how well they came along. But what you're seeing is in real time. It's not slow motion. It's a result of the NIST computer simulations in real time, seeing from the same side, the north side, as you have seen the videos. So we don't have any problems here. There's a little here. This is the north side. This is from the video. The 12th floor is here. This little stop is my computer. It stops. They don't go any further. This is all they have, all they got. Please.
Are there no regulations which will force them to actually submit their data?
Is there no regulations which would actually force them to submit the data? No. And we have even submitted what you call a Freedom of Information. According to the Freedom of Information Act, the so-called FOIA requests, they should publish their software, but they have refused to do so. And actually, Lee Hamilton, who was vice chairman of the committee, I have been almost on the phone with him, a friend of mine. I was sitting next to a friend of mine on the phone with Lee Hamilton, and who said, we'll force NIST to release their software, but they haven't done it yet. Yes, please.
There was someone who actually made a FOIA request, and the answer from NIST is that releasing the computer data could jeopardize the safety of the public.
Yeah, okay. Do you get the point here? Thank you for this. It's true, I just remember it. They say if they release their software, they'll tell all the terrorists how to take down buildings. So they're claiming security claims here.
But if the public knew how Building 7 collapsed, they would have gotten to know how it could have been prevented in the future.
That's a very good point. I'll return to that in 5 minutes. But so I'll just dwell a little bit. There are many things wrong with the NIST report. I will not hesitate to call it scientific fraud. It's a criminal. It's a crime. It's a fraud. And I could, of course, spend hours criticizing the NIST report. I'll spare you for that. But just a few points which should be appreciated by everyone. One point is, it's a basic fire. Was there at all a fire on the 12th floor in the northeast corner? Because NIST came out with an interim report. In 2004, they came with a preliminary report on the fires. And this is actually pretty good work. It's very meticulous account of the fires in the building. And according to this interim report from 2004, I read, around 3 p.m., fires were absorbed on floor 7 and 12 along the north face. The fire on floor 12 appeared to bypass the northeast corner and was first observed at a point approximately 1/3 of the width from the northeast corner and then spread both east and west across the north face. It stopped on the east end of this fire, as I showed you just before. But the point here is that around 4:45, the 12th floor was burned out. So there was no fire. Apparently, at least 45 minutes before the building collapsed. Now, this information was not in the 2008 version of the report. So we asked him, how come this information had disappeared from the 2008 report? And I said, well, we just discovered that it was not. Fact is, of course, they have changed their hypothesis. So they were manipulating the data. Yeah, this is the fire on the 12th floor. And this is, you have column 79 out here, and the fires actually stopped in this end, and it moved westward. You've seen that picture before, so we'll just see. Now, what I think actually from a scientist point of view is more, we love doing experiments. And when they worked on the Twin Towers, NIST, they actually did a couple of pretty good experiments. One thing was that they built a full scale of the floor support, a floor structure. In the Twin Towers, they have floor supports on 20 meters. They were too big for an oven, but they also have floor supports on 10 minutes, and they had ovens this big, so they built a full-scale model of 10 meters of the floor, put it into an oven, heated it up, and waited for it to fall down. It didn't. It sagged. So this is actually an experimental result from the NIST report on the Twin Towers. And what you can see that when you heat up a floor assembly, of course the beam, the steel expands, but it softens at the same time. So they do not push down these girders. They sag. They're hanging. So there is a direct contradiction. Actually, NIST is using this result from the Twin Towers to make probable that the Twin Towers should collapse. But there's a direct violation between this experimental result from the Twin Towers and then the hypothesis on building 7. On 7, they say that the floor assembly remains stiff and is pushing down this steel beam here, but their own experiment shows that it does not do so. It's sagging because the steel gets soft when it gets warm. Now, there is no reason for assuming that a local damage should expand through the whole steel structure. NIST call it progressive collapse. That is, you have a very localized damage. This is what they claim. On the northeast corner on the 12th floor. There is no reason to expect this to go through the whole steel structure. Of course, the engineers and the architects, they build into the whole structure a certain, it's called redundance. Actually, the building can support much more than it actually does. There's an excess. It can easily manipulate a local failure. It does not progress. You can find no structural engineer who will support this hypothesis of progressive collapse. And maybe you can appreciate it's more philosophical that an asymmetric damage can never cause a symmetric collapse. This is a property of nature. Maybe it's a bit philosophy. But my final, what you might say, claim here is, do we believe, they claim that the whole inner structure would fall down. And the destruction of the inner structure caused a lot of dust. And they want us to believe that this whole thing should go down without you can actually see anything on the outside. I'll show you now a little video just to illustrate the magnitude of the dust clouds coming out. And these are what you call pyroclastic clouds, which I know you will appreciate because you only see them from volcanoes. These are hot dust clouds. It's a little entertaining, this video.
That sucker was gonna go.
It's coming here, isn't it?
What, the cloud?
Yeah, look at it.
Oh yeah.
What do we do? Jump inside?
No.
He's gonna come up here.
No. The World Trade Center didn't make it this far.
What? There are people down there.
No, there's nobody down there either. They cleared the street. See, that's why they didn't try to put that fire out.
So we have a problem. They should work side by side rule now for comparison. Maybe I'm cheating a little bit. I should have put in bricks here.
But you can see the mist coming down first. Right. Highest point. You can see the penthouse coming down first.
Yeah.
And blow down the pillars in the center.
Yeah. But some of us are not happy with this. But if we should just make our summary is a steel frame high-rise that does not collapse due to fire. This is experience, and we could stop there. But we have given the NIST hypothesis a chance. They claim that Building 7 came down due to office fires. To this we must respond that small office fires cannot cause free fall. Please recall that it is coming down as if there was nothing supporting it. At that time, all the supporting elements of the building is gone. We cannot see sudden onset, severe collapse, total collapse all the way down. We have a problem, what in my business is called the scientific method, which maybe some of you consider is outrageously academic. It is not. It is just a very sensible way of observing our physical surroundings, which has worked fine for 400 years. What you do, according to the scientific method, you start making observations. And you should do that without prejudice, which is actually the hard part, to see what you see. And when you do experiments, and when you're done, when you collect some observations, you come up with a hypothesis at some times. You have an idea for some explanation for the whole thing. And when you have that, you step back and you test your hypothesis. Can all observations be explained? And then I will claim that the NIST collapse model cannot explain the observations. Actually, none of them. But according to the scientific method, it's a requirement that all observations should be explained by your hypothesis. Can observations be predicted? If NIST were right, it means that you could demolish buildings by just starting a little fire. You could start a company, you could patent it. This has not happened. You would expect actually all office buildings to be evacuated on September the 12th, because this meant that they would all be death traps. This did not happen. You would expect they to change the building code regulations according to this. This has not happened. You would expect all the insurance premiums to go up immediately if a building could collapse just due to this fire. This has not happened. So we have a problem. If the hypothesis does not pass the test, the rule says you must come up with a new hypothesis. And this I'll do when we have had a little break. I know I have been delayed. There have been questions on our way. I hope you appreciate that we are a little late. So if you please, I'll ask you to come back in say 10 minutes time in 9:30, and I will come out and suggest another hypothesis. Thank you.